Welcome back to Beyond the Wrench. My name is Jay Goninen, and I am your host. On today's episode, we welcome Robert Solei. Robert is an ASE Master Certified Technician, has a lot of insight on the industry, and I got a chance to talk to him in our intro call and was really fascinated with a lot of his insights on the next generation of technicians, his views on flat rate, which might be a little bit different than a lot of people. So welcome to the show, Robert. How are you?
I'm great, Jay. How you doing?
Good, good. How's working on cars? Busy?
Busy, hot, really hot
Hot?
right now.
Yeah, yeah. You're where are you located at? You're in the South.
South Georgia.
South Georgia. So July in South Georgia, not the coldest time of year by any stretch.
Not at all.
So what all you working on lately?
Well, it seems like here lately, I guess because of the heat, we're doing a lot of HVAC,
Yep.
a lot of cooling system repairs, stuff like that. A lot of batteries. I mean, these batteries don't stand a chance really in this heat these days.
Yeah, that's kind of an underrated part of batteries, or maybe a not talked about part of batteries to the general consumer. I think we're up in Wisconsin, right? And so you're always thinking in the cold weather, that's when it's hardest on batteries. But in reality, that heat is just an absolute killer for batteries. And I think shops do see an uptick in battery jobs as a result. That heat is not great.
Yeah, I agree, 100%.
So let's learn a little bit about you. I have, as we talked about, seen your name quite a bit, whether it's through the WrenchWay Shop Talk or on LinkedIn or a variety of different forums. You always have really good comments, really good insight, and I think that comes from a lot of experience, right? You've been in the industry for a long time. How long have you been in it?
About 34 years, I'd say. Counting from the very beginning of getting my hands dirty until now, I'd say a little over 30 years.
What was your first job?
I actually was at a quick lube place, and
All right.
I look back on that, and it was kind of hilarious. I mean, we tore so much stuff up. Just how it is on early on in the quick lube days. When the 10-minute oil change come in. So that's where I started. So it was actually a good start, though.
Yeah, and when you reflect on that, what were you able to learn that has really applied to you growing over the years?
I think my number one take was, the customer giving you possession of their vehicle, what that meant to me as a technician. I learned that very early, early on, the responsibility. It's always something I've kind of taken personal. And, I guess that was my first really initial take from the business was, wow, customers, dropping their stuff off here and we got to fix it, So it was kind of one of those things early on. And I probably had the same thought process a lot of beginners, have, which is this for me? Is this not for me? What am I going to do? How am I going to get trained? Where to go from here?
How did you get through that part? And the reason I ask is because in reality, that's the part I didn't get through, right? I started off as a technician and went through a lot of those similar struggles that you probably did, and a lot of people that do come into our industry go through. And I did it at my family shop. And at some level, I think it does, especially in those early days when you're getting your butt kicked, it does make you question whether you want to be in the industry or not. And the hard part is, and I think it's maybe gotten better over the years, but as you and I grew up in the industry, there wasn't a whole lot of shop support to try and get that young person up and going. And not that I'm pointing the finger at anybody for not pursuing a career as a technician, but I also think when I look back and reflect on it, there were a lot of opportunities where maybe if you do get paired with the right mentor, or you do get some more training and maybe a little bit more hands-on training, that you could have been a little bit more successful at it. And I think you see the same thing with a lot of young technicians today, where they battle this and maybe get their butts kicked, and it really helps them understand whether they truly love this or they want to go a different route. I think the difference in today's world versus when you and I came up in the industry is that there are a lot of other opportunities. There are a lot of other job options out there. And so you don't necessarily have to stick with it. And so we see that as a maybe a negative impact to our industry. But as you look back at those early years, what was it that really kept you going and saying, it was it just kind of a gradual gain of confidence as you got better and better doing some of those repetitive jobs that maybe gave you some confidence? What was it that really led for you to have this successful career in the industry?
Well, I think first off, I just loved cars. I was y- so young, I would, pop the hood and I'd be like, wow, look at how this is made, front wheel drive. Who would have ever thought the engine would be sideways, And I'm dating myself there. But that's kind of the way I looked at it. I was really interested in the engineering aspect, how they made it, wow, they put a electric fuel pump in the gas tank. That's crazy, things like that. And then, luckily, I had an older brother that was in the business. He really took me under his wing.
That
And
helps.
I've always had, the family support from the wife and the kids. But I think as I kind of went along early, talking about confidence, as I went along earlier, went to a dealer here and there, went to, some other places, the confidence finally came. But the confidence was an obstacle early on. I mean, I was one of those scared technicians, I really was.
I think I mean, that's still common today. As you see young people coming into your shop, are there still those similarities to young Robert?
The same hurdles, same hurdles. Confidence, being maybe a little too nervous about this or that. And I think it's okay to be a little bit scared. Now, I know some really good technicians that are not scared at all. But I think it's okay to be a little scared. I see that I see myself in a lot of the young techs, male and female now. Um, and I think that's what kind of pushes me to want to help them a little bit because I remember what it was like starting out, and I often remind, a lot of the younger techs starting out, it's a little bit easier now. You can go to these big box stores and really buy everything you need to start off for $500. And that was not the case, when we started out, so, I try to let them know there's some things easier, some things maybe a little harder, but I see myself and all these people starting out in the business.
Yeah, and it can be tough in those early days. And as I still talk to a lot of young technicians right now, there's a lot of concern that, hey, I'm just going to get thrown in the lube bay and I'm just going to be doing oil changes all day and then maybe progress to brakes and alignments and suspension, that kind of stuff. And I think one of the areas where a young tech could really help themselves out right now is with a little patience. And it's easy for me to say looking back, but with just a little patience and sticking with it, you do start to gain a little bit of confidence each time you do anything, right? If you do oil changes and you really figure out your process and how to do it really, really well, and to make sure that the car is very clean once you're done with it, and there's no oil stains on the inside of the interior, and there's no oil dripping from the bottom of the vehicle. I think when you take pride in that, that's when you start learning things, and as you adapt your process, even in those early days, that can be what helps you down the road. And then as you do progress and you start to maybe go to a brake job, okay, maybe you're a little bit more organized when you're laying out all the parts, when you're getting everything ready to go. And I truly feel like if you can stick with it in those early days and really gain that confidence and kind of get your system down and how you approach your bay, it can lead to a long-term career, a really successful career as a technician.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as time
Now,
goes by farther and farther, I think that becomes more prevalent. I think it'll be a job that continues to pay a little bit better as the years go by. Because, I mean, there's no sense in hiding the fact the numbers are declining. So being able to, kind of predict your own path later on or even now, um, that's pretty good for a career.
yeah, and I think you're right. It is trending upward, and I think maybe not at the pace that some would like it to see, but we had done a technician pay survey a couple months back, and we got a great response for it. And then out of that, built a technician pay tool on WrenchWay so that people could kind of track and see the way that the technician market is going. And I do think that's helpful for both shops and technicians. But what we were seeing was that the data that was supplied by the Bureau of Labor Statistics really wasn't accurate. And when we talk to technicians each and every day, you are hearing a lot more that are really, really being taken care of. And, I just did a podcast yesterday with a person that we talked about how they view technicians as athletes. And I think that's really kind of the mindset change that's happening. And it is hard on your body. It can be hard on your body, but there's also maybe a shift there too, where uh, you know, when we grew up, we had to be kind of the tough guys, and you had to,
Yeah.
lift that engine out or lift that transmission up by yourself without using any safety, any type of lifting device to kind of just kind of show off maybe a little bit. But I feel like a lot of that type of culture has changed. I think people are working a lot smarter now and doing things to conserve their bodies over time so that when they do get to be a more experienced technician with 30 years of experience, that their body still feels all right and that they feel like they can still be on cement every day.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, when you said that, it made me think. I had a flashback. What are you doing wearing safety glasses? What are you worried you're going to put your eye out or something?
Right?
It's entertaining for me though when you talk about how it was, being the tough guy, and you and I touched on this earlier. God forbid you have a sick day, or you have to go to the dentist, or you put, I wouldn't say put on safety glasses, but let's say you put on hearing protection, which I do all the time now because
Very smart.
my hearing is already starting to go. So, but another thing too, I just as I become older, probably in my 50s, I started paying attention to how other people looked at me, not just at work, not only as a parent, but like if someone sees you, and they see you doing, putting on your safety glasses, putting on your hearing protection. If you have a beard, maybe shave, keep your hair looking halfway decent. A lot more people are paying attention to that than you would ever imagine.
It's so true. And I think that is a really key point to how we continue to elevate our industry, right? The more buttoned up we look, the more professional we look, the less the customer is going to question it as prices continue to go up, right? When what they're paying for in their vehicle, it does keep getting more expensive, right? And it's because the
Yeah.
tooling is more expensive, technician wages are a lot more, and it is one of those things where I think for those technicians that are out there listening to this, the more we can really create that professional image, the more we're going to help ourselves out, right? It's going to help us out in those conversations with leadership when maybe you're going to ask for a raise. It's going to help you out with the customer and really building that respect that I think a lot of people in our industry really, really want and desire. And I think the way that you put it is perfectly stated in that it changes the way people look at you. It looks different than maybe it did it back when we were coming up in the industry.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a manager a long time ago tell me when I had long hair, of course, and I had hair, of course. But anyway, he said, Robert, if you cut your hair, maybe look a little bit more professional, you might make more money. And I was so, I was like 23, and I was like, what the heck is this guy talking about? But I totally get it. I really do now that as I've gotten older. I'm like, I see what he's saying, But at 20 something, I'm like, how am I going to get a raise from a haircut? I don't understand that.
Well, how do we convey that to a younger person now, right? Because I think we were all that person when we were first coming into the industry where we might take offense to something like that if maybe a manager says something. And when you look back and leadership is trying to tell you something like that, it's not that they're trying to pick on you. It's not that they're trying to put you down. It really is that they are trying to help you improve as a person. Obviously, that helps their business if you're more productive and are more polished and professional. but it's going to help you out as a person, an individual as well. How do we communicate that to a younger generation without them maybe feeling offended?
I use social media as a baseline, right? All young people now know about YouTube, and many. We can talk all day, naming off labels, but I say think of yourself as a brand. Young people are very, very much connected in the social media and YouTube, and they understand YouTube a lot, like some of these big time YouTubers. So I say, look at yourself as a brand. If you were somebody that wanted to reach out to you for a sponsorship, let's say, look at yourself as a brand. Even though you work for, XYZ, automotive shop, people that come in that may see you may ask for you by name. Therefore, you can kind of consider yourself somewhat, of a brand or professional. So I would always say, don't just because some other guy's got tattoos on his face and stuff like that, and you think that's cool, maybe that's okay. But what I'm saying is, um, look at it very much on an individual basis. How do you want to project yourself? Because that's the best thing that I can come up with. I'm not a
Well, even in that example, though, with tattoos, I remember interviewing technicians that would have tattoos and maybe like a full sleeve or something like that. And I was never offended by it. And in fact, there are a lot of people that look really professional with tattoos, right? And if they're
Yeah.
nicely done, I think the one piece of advice I would give to a technician that if you're considering getting a tattoo would be just make sure it's tasteful, make sure it's not offensive, make sure it's not going to offend anybody, but you can do it and make it look really nice and clean and still be buttoned up and polished. Like I
Oh,
think that the
absolutely.
connotation between the two, right? The connection where if
Yeah.
they have tattoos, they're dirty. That's long gone, right? I have
Yeah.
some of my best friends in the world that have sleeve tattoos, and honestly, they look really cool. I don't think I'm cool enough to be able to pull one off, but I think it goes beyond that. It's just being tasteful. Even when you make a decision, like a personal decision to go get a tattoo, just make sure it's done with the taste, right? Make sure it's
Yeah.
done clean and professional. And I think the credibility piece you're not going to have to worry about.
Yeah. And I didn't mean to come off as bashing
Oh
the
no, not at
tattoos.
all.
But
No.
I'm just saying, I try to, whatever you put in, you get out, and maybe some things work out better than others.
Well, another piece to that, and I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on this. A clean toolbox and an organized toolbox, I think that speaks volumes about the technician. And if it's a cluttered toolbox with a lot of stuff going on and they're always fumbling around looking for stuff, I feel like that isn't portrayed as a good technician, or maybe they are a good technician, but they're so disorganized that they struggle on getting work done in a timely fashion. I think a clean toolbox says a lot about a person.
Yeah, I agree. I've nicknamed the clean toolbox and clean roll cart as making your bed. And I mean a lot. There's a lot of podcasting, like special ops guys, Navy SEALs,
Yes.
Rangers, and one of the first things they do when they get up in the morning is to make their bed. So I've always nicknamed taking care of your box as making your bed. I think subconsciously it goes a long way too. I mean, just making sure your stuff's squared away and clean, whether you realize it at the time or not, at the end of the day, I think it makes a difference.
Oh, you don't feel as overwhelmed. You're not coming into work the next day with a mess. I think that is one of those habits, as going back to what we talked about for a technician that's starting off as a lube tech, that you can master, and you can make sure that your toolbox has the right organizers in it. And even if you don't have a bunch of cash to go buy foam for the toolbox inserts or the nice holders for pliers or whatever that organizational piece might be, you can still find ways to keep a really organized toolbox. And I think where some people run into trouble, I think really good technicians at times they start off with a smaller box, and then their box becomes overflooded with tools, and sometimes it's hard to organize them when there's just too many tools for the size of toolbox that you have. And so I appreciate that happens, but I think you can tell, the top of somebody's toolbox, if there's rags all over it and there's, it's just a cluttered mess, that it's not going to allow that technician to do some really good clean thinking.
I agree 100%.
The Bureau of Labor Statistics says technicians make around $46,000 a year. Does that sound like BS to you? We thought so too. At WrenchWay, we work with some of the best shops and dealerships across the country, and we've seen technicians make a lot more than that. So we decided to gather our own data. We're excited to announce the launch of our new online technician pay tool. You can now search technician pay by industry, shop type, location, and experience. We've already had over 3,000 technicians submit their pay data anonymously. You can explore the pay data and even submit your own data anonymously at wrenchway.com/pay. Thank you for your continuous support of WrenchWay as we strive to promote and improve automotive and diesel careers. We couldn't do it without you.
All right. So we talked earlier about the fact that you do a lot of commenting and posting your thoughts on social media, which I appreciate. I'd love seeing technicians out there, and especially with you, I think bringing some good things to the table, right? In terms of what you're seeing, boots on the ground. This is the stuff that I'm seeing in a shop. So as you're doing that, what drives you to want to go out and maybe make that comment on a social post, or to add to something that somebody's saying?
Just paying it forward. I'm at over 50 years old. I'm kind of getting close to where, I mean, I still feel good. I don't want anybody to think that I'm, thinking about retiring or anything like that. That's not happening. But, I'm at the age where I really do a lot of reflecting. And if I could say anything, even if it may not benefit me in any kind of way, if it helps someone else, especially a young person starting out, I really want to put it out there, and that's just kind of what pushed me to even make those comments and posts at all.
Yeah, which is needed. I think I hate to reflect so much on our youth, but that was one of the common things or common themes that we saw with the older generation of tech when we came in was, I learned the hard way, so you need to learn the hard way. And there's probably still some truth to that, right? Because we can't just automatically put that knowledge in your head. You're going to have to go through some of the hard times to learn the hard way. But I recall being in a shop and being terrified to go ask another technician for help, right? Because you knew what the answer was going to be. It was, figure it out. And I feel like that might be shifting and changing a little bit in shops where there are more people like you that want to help the younger generation and want to see them succeed. And I don't want to paint the picture that everybody was that way when I was growing up, but there were certainly techs that would not be the kindest to you when you're going to ask a question. And I do think that maybe has shifted over the years.
I would say every senior technician I know, just about at every shop, is very approachable and
Yeah.
takes pride in the paying it forward, or helping the younger guys. It's been one of my goals, as probably I'd say within the last 10 years, is I wanted to be the spark plug in the shop. I wanted to be the fun guy, the one that has helps with a good environment, because it's so easy to go the other direction, But I wanted to be approachable. That was my biggest thing. If you have any issues, you have any questions, stop, give me a shout. And but I do agree with what you said, a bit earlier about maybe some people might do better if they're kind of under the bus a little bit. One of the big things we're doing right now is teaching guys alignments, and some guys kind of pick it up really quick, some guys not so much. And in some, if you throw them under the bus and let them figure it out, let them make some adjustments that might be completely wrong, which is some patience on your part, because you have to let them make it, um, sometimes that does good. Sometimes, there's a confidence thing though. You don't want someone to get in such a bind that they leave that day and go, I'm never doing this again. You have to be careful. You got to know, you got to know your people, So I would hope that, all of us older guys would be at least approachable, because again, a lot of the younger guys look at us and like, wow, I wish I was at their level already or something like that. But little do they know, we're still learning every day. We're still trying to, whatever this next design is, that don't get me fired up about that. But anyway, whatever the next thing is, we're still trying to figure it out too. So, being approachable, and I guess to add to that point, let everyone know that we're practicing this business every day.
I love the positivity in what you talked about there, and being that person in the shop that's uplifting and that is really trying to be approachable. I think every shop in the nation would take somebody like that right now, right? That really helps uplift the culture. And we actually, this is funny that you say that. We had built a tool for a client of ours that was kind of really a culture gauge, right? And really being able to rank your technician team on culture, and when you interview somebody, see where they fall into it, right? Where are they adding to the culture, or are they going to take away from the culture? And granted, you can't learn everything through a simple series of interviews and conversations with an individual, but the whole point of it is, when you bring somebody that adds value to your culture, and you're not just looking at technical ability. Granted, technical ability is absolutely huge, but when you shift your focus to really putting the pieces of the puzzle together in a shop to where you have a fun shop to come work, I think that just makes daily life in a shop so much better.
Yes. Yes. Now, I wasn't always the happy guy now, and I still have my days. I'm sure some of my buddies watching this right now could attest to that. But, I don't know when the change happened, but I was kind of the grouchy guy for many years. I only turned such and such hours this week and blah, blah, blah. Got too many waiters. We can go on and on. And the business is kind of tough. It is. You know, Here the last month or so, it's been 110, 115-degree heat index. We get, a lot of waiters. And it's easy to be grouchy. Oh my gosh, it's so easy, really. So, you know, at one point I said, you know what? I make a good living. I love where I work, and I'm gonna go in there and have fun. And I did that from the day I walked into the shop that I'm at now, and it's been pretty good, I think. And that goes back to, it's so contagious. Everybody, when they walk in the door, hey, I've always had a thing too where I tell everybody hello and goodbye, and at the end of the day, it's just the way I was raised. But as soon as they come in, for a while, a couple of weeks, they wouldn't really say anything. But when they come in now, hey, Rob, how you doing? Hey, Jay, how you doing? Um, it just, man, it goes such a long way. When things aren't going right and you got to come back, or a broke part, or maybe an irate customer, it's nice to lean on that. It really is.
Do you recall what it was that made you switch?
I think it was really, it was kind of like a personal thing. For me, I was becoming an empty nester, and I don't know if you have kids or how old your kids
I've
are.
got one 7-year-old son. Yes.
Okay, so you're going to go through the same thing. You kind of go through this, well, what do I do now phase? What am I? Am I auto technician? Does that define me? And I just didn't want to be defined by what I did for a living. I wanted to be the guy that, if people had a personal problem, and wanted to talk after work or something like that, or if they needed advice, after work again, I could be that guy. So I said, well, if I can do that, on personal level for friends, I can do that, at work, and apply it to, vehicles, something you're confused about, something, what's bothering you. You got some, really big mud tires or something. What's going on here? Let's make, and we'll have a little bit of fun with it. Life is short. And I'll tell you another thing too that really, really changed me kind of a little bit before that. And I don't mean to go on a somber note, but I went to a very, very young person's funeral, very young. And it put a lot of things in life in perspective for me. And that changed me from that time forward. So everything I try and take every day, try to have fun, you know, and I hate to sound somber and all those. You don't know what day is going to be your last. I don't want to get into all that, but life is still short. Nobody can deny that. So I just try to, you know, see if we can have a little fun today. You know, do something unordinary.
I like that though, and those somber notes stink to go through, but the perspective it does bring in allowing you to think a little bit differently probably changed your life, right? Because
Yeah.
instead of focusing on all the negative, which believe me, when you're out on social media and you read a lot of the comments, and especially as a technician and a young technician that's out there reading that, it can get really easy to get caught up in the noise. And regardless of how happy you are at work or how good you are at your job, if you just keep reading all of the negative and feeding yourself the negative talk in your head, and then if you maybe pair that with a negative shop culture, which kind of then almost validates those comments that are on social media, then you start putting the pieces together. And I think that's where so many in our industry are being swayed away right now, right? Is that
Yeah.
we kind of feed into the noise a little bit. And in reality, if you take a step back and you look at the progression of the career in even the last 5 years, it's starting to change, right? There's starting to be more of a professional label on what we're doing. There's starting to be a lot more respect for what we're doing because not everybody can do it, right? And so,
Yeah.
you know, having that positive influence in the shop and really bringing a different energy, it just makes it easier to come to work. And I think some of you shops that are out there listening right now might be struggling with this part, right? Of trying to get your team to be positive, to get them to not just always be complaining about everything. And I think it does come, I think a really effective strategy is what Robert just said right there. Have conversations with them, talk with them, learn about some of their problems. And I think the more and more you talk with a person, the more and more you let them get that out of them, that weight that they're feeling, the better they're going to feel about coming to work in the morning.
I agree. Cannot communicate enough, whether it's you know, a car or maybe a process you're, you know, struggling with going through, or you know, whatever. You can't talk enough. And I mean, you know, communication is key. We all know that. But you know, if someone's struggling with a certain aspect of the business, you know, talking to another fellow technician or somebody else in the shop, you know, maybe they could put a different perspective on it and help it along. You know, but it is very, 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 very easy to kind of complain. I've really tried to watch that with myself over the years.
How do you check yourself? I mean, you mentioned it earlier, but not every day is going to be roses and rainbows, right? You're going to have troubles. You're going to get your butt kicked, even with your level of experience at times. And, you know, that bolt that breaks that kind of spins your day out of control. And, you know, it can really, really ruin your day. Or maybe even just something, if you're in a mood and somebody comes by and says something wrong to you, I think it can really be easy to spiral out of control. How do you maintain your head in those types of scenarios?
You know, I think for me, and advice I would give to maybe someone else that kind of wants to change that path is, you know, I could kind of tell early on, like in the day, if I'm just not having a good day, and then maybe I might fuss a little bit about a, you know, ticket that didn't go my way or something like that, or maybe it seems like a couple things kind of line up, and I'm go, you know what, I have every tool I need right here. Um, I got a customer that wants the car fixed, and so what's the problem? Let's fix it. That's what I do, right? So you know, I don't know what it would be for everyone, you know, but for me, it seems like a couple things kind of line up, and you know, I just have to snap out of it, you know.
And I think if you can align yourself with some type of trigger, right? So that when you are getting frustrated, you have something that says, okay, step back for a few minutes, take a breath, think through this a little bit, and maybe figure out some type of exercise to get your mind right. And as you mentioned, it's different for everybody, but I think it's really important to do that, because you don't want that bad day spiraling into a bad week, and then a bad month, and then a bad year, and then a bad decade, right? Which can
And it
easily
will.
happen.
It will.
Yes.
It will.
Yeah, it does. And I think that's life, and it's really, really hard to keep things in perspective. But when you go through a moment like you did, I think that is those are the moments in life where you can look at it and say, you know what, we're pretty lucky. We've got a lot of really, really good things going on for us. So I just love the attitude part that you bring to the table. I wish we had more and more in our industry, not just technicians, but the industry as a whole, that brought that level of energy, because that enthusiasm, that happiness, that is contagious. And when you talked about that spreading throughout a shop, it is so true. It just takes one really good person to drive that. And I love the fact that you're that person in your shop. That is such a cool piece. Now, when we kind of go into the actual operations of a shop, I've got a couple of things I want to run by you. The first being something you just mentioned, which is getting a bad ticket, maybe a job that you don't want, or maybe you've gotten, 3 oil changes in a row and you feel like your boss is punishing you. Like how this is a scenario that I think we should have more conversations around, because I've seen both ends of that, right? I've been on both ends of that. And it sucks when you get the bad work continually fed to you. And maybe you think it's like, oh, did I screw something up? And they're kind of feeding me this bad work because of that. Or, it leads your mind to kind of wander a little bit. But then I see the management side and the service management side and how they're allocating work. In most cases, it's not anything personal to anybody. It's really trying to spread the workload out, making sure you're getting as many vehicles through the shop as you can. And if you've got a diag issue and you have a person that's good at diag, you're probably going to push the diag work to them. Or if you have a good undercar person that can get through work really fast, you probably are more partial to that person on some of those types of repairs. But I think at some level, it goes back to communication, in that I'm not trying to punish you as a manager on the work that I'm feeding you. I'm literally just trying to get through the day because my phone doesn't stop ringing. I'm trying to get all of the appointments in and trying to keep all of these customers happy. And I think a lot of times the technician can maybe read into that a little too much, but maybe I'm off base. Can you clarify that part for me?
No, I agree with you 100%. I think a lot of times as technicians, we're really good at fixing a particular problem that we may not like the operation, right? Like, oh, this compressor, you gotta, contort 10 different ways and remove the bumper off the car, just to get the compressor, and it only pays so many hours, but to me, they're sending that ticket out back with faith. They want to put the right guy on the right job. And, a lot of times, if just because you don't like the particular ticket or what you're doing, you may be the best man for the job or woman for the job, yeah, that's why I agree. I think more times than not, that's the case. In my experience, in my environment. And, sometimes, it might not be your favorite car, but you know what? In that particular time and moment, you're the best guy for the job. So I think I agree. I think it comes down to that more than it's, malicious.
So let's stick on the communication between office and shop a little bit more. I think you talked about how communication, that you can never have enough communication, right? It always feels like there's some type of gap in communication. I think a lot of times managers have a tough time approaching a technician team, because you might have a personality in the shop that is, going to object to things that you're saying, or they're going to, regardless of what you say, kind of poke fun at it, or kind of give you a hard time about it. And I think, I don't want to paint all managers in that picture, but I've seen a lot of them over the years that really struggle with that, of something as simple as bringing everybody together for a team huddle in the morning, and you've got one technician that says, I'm not going to do that. And I think it goes to the culture of the shop, and why you need strong leaders in your really, really experienced techs. You need technicians that really buy into the company, that have pride in the company, and that want what's best for the company. Because if you have that, then you're setting the culture, you're setting the standard for everybody else in the shop. And if you're lacking that, that can be really, really hard to get around, can it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes back to what I talked about with, in my opinion, about the branding. A senior guy in the shop, you should be probably a decent leader, or, someone that can kind of, cut through the mustard per se, maybe bond some relationships, maybe work things out. And again, as I've gotten older, I've seen where a lot of places really do rely on the senior guys to, kind of maybe build a bridge between the front and the back, or um, and in all honesty too, I think when it comes to our business, sometimes you got to swallow a little bit of pride, for the sake of the team, and you want your shop to be have a good reputation wherever you work. You just want to be known as, if you're out in public somewhere and someone says, "Hey, where do you work?" and you tell them, they're like, "Oh yeah, I take all my stuff over there. You guys are awesome." Everybody wants that outcome. Nobody wants, "Oh, they got a guy over there that messed my car up last time." Blah blah blah. So yeah, I think definitely as time goes by, I just see a lot more of the leadership aspect from guys outside that maybe have been employed there for a while. Maybe building at least a pathway for the guys up front to help manage better, I guess, right?
Yeah, I think that's an underrated part of a shop, is if you have a good leader of your shop, and it might not come in title, right? It might not have a management title with it, but it is so key. And then I think a great practice that really good leaders do, or really good managers do, is to have open and honest communication and conversation with that leader of the shop, right? If you can pull them in into the conference room or into your office or wherever it might be, and talk with them and be transparent about what's going on in the shop. I think the best shops that I've seen have really rock solid relationships in that capacity, right? Where
Yeah.
you can pull that person in, have good conversations with them, not be worried that what you're as a manager telling that technician, that they're going to go out and kind of spew it all over the shop and start telling everybody. Some things are okay to do that with, but like a lot of the stuff, if you're that technician out there that's really wanting to get to that level to where you have that really good conversation and relationship with your manager, you got to build some trust there too, right? It can't
Oh
be
yeah.
that you go in and air all the dirty laundry when you go back out to the shop. You have to be a trusted confidant that is going to, that we know your heart's in the right place. We know that what I'm telling you isn't going to just be spewed out. And because a lot of times that when it happens is out of context, and they'll say something that gets the entire shop fired up, and that's not what the actual message was in the first place.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of importance for that senior technician in the shop to really work to gain that trust. It'll make your life significantly easier.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. 100%.
Have you ever had a manager do that with you, where they're kind of having those good open conversations with you kind of on the side?
I would say with me personally, at least the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Now early on, I've had, I've been in shops, not the senior guy, but just, employed, and, seeing some bad relationships, seeing, guys in the front talk bad about the guys in the back. This was part of my dealership experience now. Um, you know, that going on all the time. I'm like, how in the world do people survive working in this environment? And it's a big place too that I was at. So I think that just makes everything that much worse, right? The more personalities, the bigger the environment. And unfortunately, that was my little small stint at a dealership. That's kind of how that was going. But ever
And
since
I
then, I've had a pretty good relationship, and with management and vice versa.
that sucks when you're in that situation, right? Where you do have all of that infighting and all the drama, and it feels like maybe a little bit of an extension of being in high school or something. Like there, it just, a lot of immaturity. And I think that can be the thing that drives somebody out of the industry, right? Is like, why
Yeah.
would I put up with all this if I don't have to?
Yeah. And another thing too, I kind of seen happen a lot that I thought about over the years is, as technicians, we can go to work anywhere, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's not a weapon though. That's not a weapon. You shouldn't use that as, well, if you don't do what I want right now, I'm going to leave and go somewhere else. Stop that. There's no reason for that. And that happened a lot. I heard that a lot there. Luckily, I rarely ever hear that, in the last, quite a few years since I've been employed at a different place. But that was a big thing. That was a big thing. The lead guy, they would be almost worried, scared to talk to him about anything.
Yeah. What a great point that is. And I think it's I always love comparing shops to sports teams, right? And if you look over the years, when you have a player that sits out for contract demands, or it doesn't like the way the team is run, or it has some type of bad attitude, their team typically ends up having a terrible year because of it, right? And it's
Yeah.
because they've brought all of the attention on them, in that they're not being maybe a good team player. And I think the parallel there is very similar. I think if you've got that person in the shop that is constantly, I've heard it from a lot of managers and I've had that happen to myself in running shops, that you get that tech that is constantly holding that over your head, right? And constantly saying, hey, you know what? I probably I want to get paid a little bit more, but they just constantly use that as leverage. And at some point you kind of look at it and you say, okay, are you really a part of this team, or are you just kind of constantly on the look for your next thing? And if you are, that's fine, but you can't be here. We can't run a business this way. And I think there are a lot of shops that get leveraged by technicians that way, right? Because they can't find technicians, or they really struggle to find good quality technicians to come work for them. So they are deathly scared that they're going to lose this person. And it almost turns into that desperation type of situation, where they can smell the desperation on you, and they're going to leverage it as much as they can. And I just
Yeah.
go back to, it's the quality of people that you hire in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I agree.
All right. So shifting gears a little bit here, I want to talk about flat rate. This is a lightning rod type of topic in our industry. If you go to any type of social media, you go anywhere where there's conversation and flat rate is brought up, you get people that are fiercely passionate on on both sides, right? But you kind of hear the negative a lot more than you do the positive. But your viewpoint is a little bit different on flat rate, isn't it?
I'm fired up about it.
Yeah, which is,
I love it.
you don't hear every technician saying that, right?
Yeah. And, I don't like putting ages on things, but it does seem like maybe us older guys like the flat rate a little bit more than maybe the younger folks. And
Yeah.
that's okay. That's okay. But my dad was a drill sergeant when I grew up. Nothing, let me get my hand here, nothing was fast enough. Nothing was fast enough. So, you know, growing up in an environment like that, which I had a great father, I don't want anybody to think different, but, growing up in that environment, it just kind of put me in a different gear work wise. I worked with him in the summer. He owned his own painting and contracting business. And again, you're never fast enough, right? So, I don't know. I just love it, man. I love it. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. But again, the company I work for, they have a very, very fair flat rate system, including vacations and stuff like that. So my opinion probably is a little bit skewed, on that. But yeah, I was built for flat rate. Do it right. Do it right the first time. No comeback, and then you don't have to do it a second time. You move on to the next ticket, and that's been, because everybody has told me, or people that I know in the industry has said, well, you just all the flat rate guys just throw stuff together and this and that and this and that. I said, I couldn't think that's farther from the truth. For me, I very, 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 focused on getting that car done, get that car done right, because I don't want to have to do it a second time because that costs me too much.
I think the best flat rate techs I've seen view it that same way, right? They take a lot of pride. And honestly, I think a lot of flat rate techs, when they get their mind around it, they do view themselves as their own personal brand. They do view themselves as almost their own small business, right? Within
Yeah.
a bay. And I think the more you can look at it that way, if you are in that situation, if you are on flat rate and you do get excited about it, you do get excited about the fact that, hey, guess what? If I do good work, they're going to be coming back. If I work my tail off, I can make a really, really good living. I can make a really good paycheck by doing this. I think when you almost bring out those competitive juices in yourself, flat rate can be a really good system. And granted, not all of them are set up the same. I think that's one thing we've talked a lot about within Wrenchway is that a lot of times people just say flat rate, right? If you see a job advertisement out there, they just say flat rate. And there are so many different variations of flat rate systems and even down to what they're pulling the hours from. It doesn't, they don't do it justice, right? If you do have
Yeah.
a really good flat rate pay system, make sure you put some meat behind it, explain it a little bit, because there are technicians that really enjoy that pay system.
Yeah, and I think I hear a lot from the guys at the dealership, and I've looked at a lot of time that a lot of factories use, and I see, I think I can see and understand the complaint a little bit, and I've
Yeah.
noticed too on some advertising I've seen a lot of dealerships are now doing warranty time plus a certain percentage. I guess that's a new thing. So again, I'm only speaking from the aftermarket end. I really couldn't speak much for those guys. I think I understand where some of their frustration lies.
And I think when you look at the dealer side, it's interesting. It's an interesting dynamic to me. I spent some of my career working for an OE, was at an OE for about 6 years and then to a dealership, and was able to see kind of both sides of that. And one of the things I noticed when I was on the OEM side is that when you start with them, with the company that I work for, you spend a couple weeks in the warranty department in training, right? And so you're going through and you're processing warranty claims. And I just posted about this on Shop Talk on a post that somebody had, and I said it's a weird system, because what happens a lot of times is that the shops or the technicians themselves don't do a very good job at writing up the job, explaining what they did. And so they'll submit it, they'll get their hours cut because there isn't a whole lot of meat behind what they're saying. And then over time, the factory is using that almost incorrect data to make judgments on how long it takes to do a job. And so it kind of creates the system where you're making at a large level, at a big level at the OE, you're making some huge decisions on bad data. And a lot of it comes down to not having quality write-ups. And I don't know that I've got the solution for that, because as if I'm that technician, I don't necessarily want to spend the extra time each day writing up a work order. But I do think there are things, and this might be an area where AI is going to really, really help us out in that kind of communication and stating what we did. We had Joe McHugh from Pencil Wrench on at one point. Some of the stuff that they've done is insane in terms of being able to auto populate a job in terms of the write up, and then adding things that that you did over and above just kind of the basic stuff. So I think even that part will get easier over the years, but I think some of the cuts in labor time have come from the fact that we haven't gotten good write-ups back to warranty departments, and so they're making judgment calls based on not real data.
Yeah. I actually wasn't that aware of that process. I'm glad you mentioned that. That helps me to understand that a little bit better.
Well, even going back to the start of our conversation, how do we train technicians to write better, right? How do we teach them to write up ROs cleaner so that people can comprehend what it is that they're doing. And if you're starting when you're doing oil changes at really being thorough on your repair orders, that's another thing that you're going to get your brain thinking a little differently right from the start. And it's going to help you out over the course of your career. And I see it all the time when somebody graduates to becoming more of a diagnostic tech or a diagnostician. If they don't do a good job writing it up, they can be the best diagnostician in the world, but it's really hard to sell that to a customer. Then when you go and say, hey, we just we found out what was wrong with your car. Well, customer's like, okay, why does that cost $500? What did you do? And if you can really go through the steps of everything that you had to do to figure out the problem, you have a much better chance of getting paid for your diagnostic time, which in return, I think, makes the industry better, makes technicians' lives better, because we're actually getting paid for the work we're doing.
Well, in the aftermarket world, the back of the ticket is very important because a lot of times we will reference that, right? If something comes back, if something, else down the line broke, we look at the back of that work order. So, I guess it's just as important, in the aftermarket world as it is, OEM place or, a dealer.
Yeah, I think as a whole, our industry, that's one area we could collectively get together and really focus on writing good repair orders, because that helps from a customer standpoint, a warranty standpoint, everything, and being able to justify the work that we're doing so we get paid for it. All right. As we look at kind of your career and you're 30 years in, what are the things that you would like to see change in our industry? And, if you've got 15 years left in this business, over the course of the time that you've got left in this industry, is there anything that you can really pinpoint as to things we could do to improve the industry as a whole?
That's kind of a tough,
It's a loaded question,
there,
right?
Jay. I appreciate that. I would say, as far as the repair industry itself, and I think everybody's kind of headed in the right direction. The one thing I will say, and it's kind of off, I wouldn't call it off topic, but it's a little bit separate. Anyway, the one thing I will say that I've seen change the last 3 years that really worry me is some of the way maybe the vehicles are designed. I mean, it seemed like they got easier to work on there for a little while, and I've got some new stuff here recently that I'm having to take half the car apart for something like an AC compressor or radiator, and it's kind of crazy. And the only reason I mention that is it's no big deal for me. I just take stuff apart, no big deal. But I see some of the younger guys, like, oh my gosh, you had to take this and this apart, and it's a little bit overwhelming. So I would like to see, maybe it would be nice if the manufacturers pay a little bit more of attention to what has to take place, for these major components that fail. And as far as the industry itself, I think everybody's, trying to make steps in the right direction for what I see. I only work at one place, so that's a tough question. But it seems like the wages are kind of coming around for what I see. I'm not, I haven't applied for a job in almost 30 years, so I don't know. But it seems like wages have come around. It seems like the word's gotten out that hey, this industry needs help. We've got to get people interested in it one way, shape, or form. I think recruiting aspect, I've seen some recruiters kind of put their hands out there a little bit on LinkedIn. Seems like that's gotten a little bit better. But yeah, I really wouldn't know what else to add to that other than everybody just, keep putting ideas out there and trying to act on it, right?
I think if manufacturers, that's such a good point. I think if manufacturers wanted to help technicians out, they could create some form of content like a podcast or something like that that explains why they designed something the way they did. And again, going back to my experience at the factory, working for the OE as a territory rep, that was one of the beautiful parts is I had direct lines to the engineers. So I would go into a dealership and I'd hear a tech say, well, why in the world would somebody design it this way? And say, I don't know, let's call the engineer. So I'd call the engineer. and get feedback. And a lot of times when they explained it, it made sense, or at least you got to know what their thinking was behind something. And so if any of you OEs that are listening out there, if you could put together some form of content that explains that, I think it'd be really, really fascinating to understand in a lot more detail.
Help us out a little bit.
Help us out a little bit. We would love that. We would love that. All right. Well, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this conversation, and you came along and put your hand up when we were in need of a podcast guest. I had put that LinkedIn post out, and I had such a fun time talking to you in the intro call, and now this, and I love the amount of joy that you bring to a shop and to this industry as a whole. So my thanks go to you. Keep up the amazing work in your shop, and help spread more of that. Right. That's what we need as an industry. So thank you so much.
I do my best. Well, thanks for having me. And again, as I said, a couple weeks back, thank you for everything you guys do at WrenchWay. It's making the world a lot better place, automotive wise. So, but thanks for having me on anytime.
That means the world, man. Take care.
Yes, sir. Have a good one.
That wraps up another episode of Beyond the Wrench. If you liked this episode, please show your support by rating and following the podcast. You can also watch the video interviews on WrenchWay's YouTube channel. Speaking of WrenchWay, did you know Beyond the Wrench is managed and produced by the WrenchWay team? WrenchWay is an online community dedicated to promoting and improving automotive and diesel careers. We help technicians find the best shops to work at, and we also help auto, diesel, and CTE instructors get more support from local industry. You can learn more by visiting wrenchway.com.